A reading from Luke 24, beginning at verse 13. That very day 2 of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What is this conversation that you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things happened. Moreover, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back, saying that they had even seen a vision of angels, who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see." And he said to them, "O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe all the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" And, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So they drew near to the village to which they were going. He acted as if he were going farther, but they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is now far spent." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures?" And they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem. And they found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. Here we have 2 disciples making their way to Emmaus. They're downcast. They have witnessed the crucifixion of Jesus, and with that, the crucifixion of all their hopes and their dreams. They were confused by what this meant. They had thought Jesus was one thing, but yet here he was crucified, so maybe he wasn't that one thing after all. And what is worse, they heard all these things about this possible resurrection, these rumours that had got to them. This was confusing stuff. And as they went, they met with Jesus. They weren't expecting to see him, of course, and they didn't recognise him. Why would they? And as they laid out their woes to Jesus, he then took them to the scriptures, to the Old Testament, and explained from there quite why it was that the things that happened did happen. This was the fulfillment of so much prophecy, the fulfillment of so much of the Old Testament scriptures. And this is instructive. You see, we read in the passage that these 2 disciples making their way north, they had seen that Jesus was somebody who was a man who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. So they'd understood that Jesus was an extraordinary prophet. They understood that Jesus was an extraordinary teacher, a man of great marvels. But they hadn't understood the wider setting for Jesus. Jesus is no mere prophet or mere teacher or mere worker of miracles. Jesus is the long prophesied God incarnate. He is God in human flesh come amongst us. He's more than all they saw. And the only way that they could have understood was against the background of the scriptures. Now, this is a challenge in a day and age which do not take the scriptures seriously, and in, I'm afraid to say, even a church which does not often take the scriptures seriously. The problem is that if you see Jesus simply as a great teacher, as these disciples did, or even a worker of great marvels, as these disciples did, you reduce Jesus to a man now dead. If, on the other hand, you put Jesus against his Old Testament background, you see something mighty at work. Here is the one prophesied by Isaiah and by so many others. Here is the one who is the fulfillment of promises to King David and so many others. Jesus has to be understood against that background for him to make any sense at all. So we must be careful not to repeat that mistake of those two disciples making their way to Emmaus. Jesus is more than simply an example. Jesus is more than simply a great teacher. Jesus is more than simply a worker of marvels. Jesus is the long prophesied Son of God. He is the one who has taken flesh and walked amongst us. He is the one through whose sacrifice can and will reconcile us back to God. This is the Jesus in whom we have faith. We don't place our faith in simply a human teacher, but in Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, God incarnate, who has come so that he might bring us all back to God.